Assistant specialist and researcher, and a former faculty member of the University of Seven Rays in the Esoteric Healing Studies. He jointly published in the Journal of Esoteric Psychology the first statistical evaluation of the PIP test that we have used over the years, Personal Identity Profile, and has extensively published in the Beacon magazine. Among his career goals is the synthesis of the orthodox and scientific method with the esoteric approach to the quest for truth. And for the last 7 years, Jose has devoted his esoteric work to the study and practice of Agni Yoga, authoring and publishing several related websites in Spanish, a very important task. It's been 20 years since Jose and I worked together. We have remained friends over all these years, although we have not really seen each other since. I think we share a great passion for the teaching. I owe a great debt of gratitude to Jose for his work on the PIP, which gave us an understanding of its strengths and weaknesses and helped sharpen it as a tool for service. I find in Jose Becerra a disciple who combines an acute clarity of the scientific mind with a passion for the ageless wisdom which is hard to equal. We gain the impression that the Tibetan teacher was attempting to develop a new phase of the yoga of synthesis in Agni Yoga. So he speaks of it in this way. He says, the keynote of the new yoga will be synthesis. Its objective will be the conscious development of the intuitive faculty. So Jose will speak on what I consider a most magnetic subject, the mystical science of the fiery heart, a secondary approach to Agni Yoga. Jose.
Testing. Good. Good morning. It's great to be here, Mike. Next slide, please. Next. Spiritual teachings are maps. Maps do not substitute reality. They just guide our approach to it. The only authority worth recognizing is the authority of first-hand experience. Maps are valid only when factually experienced. This morning, I want to share some of my maps with you and some of my experiences in using them to explore new spiritual realities. Next, please. My goal in this presentation is to develop and relate two main concepts. First, the fact of the new or Aquarian group of world servers founded in 1925 as a forerunner of the new Aquarian age on Earth. Second, the role of Vicente, Beltrán, and Anglada. Vicente Beltrán's work, the first dispensation of hierarchical teachings delivered originally in Spanish. Next. According to the trusted maps provided by the AAB-DK Teachings, a Centennial Council of Shambhala was held in 1925. This meeting of the inner spiritual government of the world usually occurs in the first quarter of each century to update the plan implementing Sanat Kumara's purpose on Earth. In this council, and I quote, "It was determined to link more closely and subjectively the senior disciples, aspirants, and workers in the world. To this end, all the masters put their personal groups of disciples in touch with each other, subjectively, intuitively, and sometimes telepathically. Thus, the new group of world servers came into being. The 7 groups of workers in the world grouped themselves into 3 main divisions, so the political, religious, and the educational departments of human evolution might be adequately served." End of quote. Next. The 1925 Centennial Council led to 3 events. The first one related to the will to good, the inflow of the force of will or power from Shambhala. The second one related to goodwill, a fresh inflow of the Christ principle of spiritual or true love. This inflow resulted in the immediate and rapid growth of all movements towards peace, world understanding, goodwill, philanthropic effort, and the awakening of the masses of men to the issues of brotherhood. The third event was related to right relations, the stimulation of the principle of relationship. This led to the growth and the perfecting of all sources of intercommunication, such as the press, the radio, and travel. The inner objective of all this was to bring human beings closer together upon the outer plane of existence, and thus parallel, objectively, the developing inner spiritual unity. Next. The same trusted maps indicate that beginning in 1975, a new post-Blavatsky-Bailey revelatory phase of teachings would emerge, to be given on the worldwide scale via the radio. It was around 1975, we know, when the World Wide Web, the Internet, was conceived. Furthermore, the same maps also indicate that the Aquarian group of world servers would develop its own yoga, school of training. This new yoga would gradually supersede the Raja Yoga, the Bhakti Yoga schools, and the keynote, as Michael just reminded us, was going to be synthesis and its objective, the conscious development of the intuitive faculty. Next. Vicente Beltrán Anglada, born in Barcelona, Spain, was an accepted disciple in conscious contact with the Second Ray Ashram. He was held prisoner during the Spanish Civil War. It was during this time, the tribulation, that his master revealed a spiritual plan for him, a life purpose that would slowly unfold throughout the years as he developed and refined his ability to contact the spiritual worlds. He was initially guided by a senior disciple initiate in the ashram. He was later trained in the art and science of contact with the angelic world under the tutelage of a highly evolved Deva. He was also a student and secretary of the Arcane School in Geneva, where he coordinated the student work of the school in Spanish until the 1960s. After leaving the Arcane School, he devoted the rest of his life to fulfilling his ashramic responsibilities. Next. The year 1975 brought the fourth impact of Shambhala and the restoration of democracy in Spain. After this, Vicente Beltrán began to speak publicly. He was not allowed to before. By 1975, he was fully conscious of his ashramic affiliation as an accepted disciple of his second-rate master. And, as approved by the master, Vicente Beltrán described in some detail the 12 members of his ashram. They were from the United States, South Africa, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, Italy, India, Hungary, France, and Spain. When the master talked to them as a group, each understood him in his or her mother tongue, which was Catalonian in Vicente Beltrán's case. In 1985, he visited Argentina, where he published his book Shambhala. It was in Argentina where Francisco Brualla, another Spaniard and a first-rate disciple of the Tibetan master, had already anchored the hierarchical work since 1937. Next. Rather than a hierarchical dispensation, Vicente Beltrán's books, 10 in total, serve as a diary of an accepted disciple in preparation for initiation. He frequently reminded us that his mission was not to be a spiritual instructor, but to share his discipleship experiences. I will read from his unpublished personal notes his own account of the 10 books. I quote, "My first 3 books were a preparation to the threefold task and were titled The Hierarchy, the Solar Angels, and Humanity, 1972, the first one there. The Mysteries of Yoga, 1976, and Esoteric Conversations, Public Talks in Barcelona, 1976 through 1980. The next two books represented an affirmation of spiritual principles. The introduction to Agni Yoga in 1981 is a practical exposition of the mystical but intensely dynamic life born in the heart when the mind stops reflecting its external circumstances and surrenders to a spiritual purpose. My book, Spiritual Experiences, 1981, is an autobiographic account of mental and psychic experiences in the life of a disciple. The purpose of sharing such experiences is to develop a discerning attitude leading to right and decisive action among spiritual aspirants. The triptych, Esoteric Treatise on Angels, these three books here, written in 1979 through 1980, consisting of three books, The Forces of Nature, Devic Structures of Forms, and Angels in the Social Life of Humanity, represented my wholehearted embrace of the ashramic task that I would specifically assume responsibility for. The next book, The Mysteries of Shambhala, was completed during my visit to Argentina according to hierarchical plans. In that book, some preliminary ideas are presented about this all-inclusive and inscrutable center guiding our spiritual evolution on Earth. Finally, with the book Organized Planetary Magic, in 1996, I attempt to fulfill the third of my ashramic commitments. Despite its simplicity, the book describes the basic practical ideas on magic, a vital process involved in any human, planetary, or cosmic act of creation. End of quote. A common thread throughout Vicente Beltrán's message is the revelation of a new yoga of synthesis, the Agni Yoga. Foremost among his tasks was promoting what he called the Threefold Hierarchical Project, sponsored by his ashram. Next, please. Vicente Beltrán independently confirmed the information provided in the Alice Bailey maps regarding the 1925 Centennial Council. The charge received by his ashram from this council may be summarized as the Threefold Hierarchical Project. First, to bring the subject of Shambhala to a wider acceptance and recognition by the world public opinion. Second, to reveal the creative forces of nature, the Deva kingdom, to the scientific world. And third, to promote the practice of organized magic, white magic, at a planetary level. Next, please. In fact, each arm of this threefold project can be mapped to one of the three events of the 1925 conclave, according to Alice Bailey. Shambhala, to the will to good principle. Second, the Deva kingdom, the Christ principle, and the imminent revelation of the mother of the world during Lord Maitreya's reappearance. And third, organized planetary magic, the principle of relationship as operating in the science of invocation and evocation. Interestingly, the Threefold Project also maps very well to the three ashrams comprising the new ashram of synthesis, with the race 1, 2, and 7. Next. Vicente Beltrán Anglada is best known in the Spanish and Latin American world by this aphorism. I will say it in Spanish. La verdad ha de presentarse de tal manera que convenza sin atar y que atraiga aún sin convencer. Y esto solo puede realizarlo el lenguaje del corazón. For years we have tried to translate these simple sentences, and still, with each attempt, a new subtle meaning is evoked. Our most recent rendition of this aphorism in English is, truth ought to be presented in such a way that it convinces without binding, and that it may appeal even without convincing. And only the language of the heart can accomplish this. The music we heard last night was wonderful, Mike. It really moved me. I think that represents what we mean by the language of the heart. We thank you and all that made it possible, and that will continue to make it possible. Next. The intuitive language of symbols is universal. It's also used by the Deva kingdom. These drawings, authored by Vicente's collaborator, the artist José Gumi, also from Barcelona, Spain, show how in the first row how an advanced Deva represents the Kundalini fire in the different kingdoms of nature, followed in the next row by the heart-shaped currents of its flow in their own angelic lives. In the final row are those symbols impressed on Vicente Beltrán's mind, representing the androgynous archetype of a future race, perfectly blending the Deva and human kingdoms. Next. Next slide, please. These other drawings, also authored by Gumi, show conversations among Devas and the ways they communicate with humans. I wonder how Vicente and Gumi would have drawn what happened here last night. We may come back to these drawings if I have time at the end, according to the signs I received from the moderator here. For Spain and Latin America, Vicente Beltrán accomplished in Spanish what Jeffrey Hudson did in English, I think. Next. According to Vicente Beltrán, Agni Yoga is a heart-centered way of living characterized by serene expectation and profound attentiveness. It endows its seasoned practitioner with a perfect sense of adaptation to life and its circumstances. The three pillars of this approach to the Agni Yoga are first, profound attentiveness, as in Krishnamurti's teachings. Second, expectant serenity, or serene expectation. And third, skillful adaptability. Vicente Beltrán's Agni Yoga represents a second-ray approach to the yoga of fiery synthesis. The first-ray approach had already been revealed by Master M through Helena Roerich during the period of 1924 through 1938, just before the end of the Spanish Civil War. Next. For Vicente Beltrán, Agni Yoga is the way to Shambhala. However, Vicente Beltrán made it very clear that Agni Yoga is not a shortcut to bypass spiritual disciplines, but rather it is a synthesis of all previous yogas. The heart that Vicente Beltrán refers to is not an emotional attitude, but a spiritual intuition, the pure reason, accessible in the Buddhic planes, an experience that transcends any intellectual approach to reality, very similar to Roerich's straight knowledge. Unlike Roerich, however, Vicente Beltrán's approach fully integrates the science of the seven rays and the science of invocation and evocation, as presented in the AAB-DK Teachings. The fourth ray of beauty and harmony through synthesis is pivotal to Vicente Beltrán's approach to Agni Yoga, as well as the use of the Great Invocation and other mantrams. In fact, Vicente Beltrán's teachings include the Aquarian mantra of unity and synthesis derived from the Great Invocation. I will say it in Spanish. Next slide, please, while you read it in English. Que la luz liberadora de Buda, el amor infinito del Espíritu de la Paz y el poder indescriptible del avatar de síntesis restablezcan el plan de Dios en la tierra. This mantra is pronounced 3 times, followed by 3 arms, preferably at 7 in the morning. It creates a group reservoir of light, love, and power to be used by group members in service activities. We invoke this great magical triangle, as we call it, to dispel glamours. Vicente calls them egregores, and to heal diseases in the mental, astral, and physical etheric planes. Next. One heart and 2 wings. Next. On the one hand, we are told that the Aquarian group of world servers is the forerunner of the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ. On the other hand, we are told that the task of the current group of world servers is not the spreading of esoteric or occult information. That is because I think the one heart of the current group is like a bird. Like a bird, it has two wings, the esoteric will-to-good wing and the exoteric goodwill wing. One will bring a new culture, the other a new civilization. Let's examine the new civilization first. Next. Self-interest, the original sin of mankind expelled from paradise, has reached both its potential and its limit as a driving force of civilization. A new social contract based on a new radical common sense of, by, and for the common good is needed. Marilyn Ferguson, dubbed the cultural midwife of the New Age movement, wrote the book The Aquarian Conspiracy in the 1980s. It was the first broad collective recognition of the fact of the Aquarian group of world servers in the different fields of services. Next. In 2005, Ms. Ferguson updated the subject in her book, Aquarius Now. In it, she speaks about this radical common sense now driving this group towards an imminent change. This needed migration of the current civilization can't be physical movement, but rather a transfiguration of the civilization itself, a collective expansion of consciousness, another discovery of a new world, like we did 500 years ago, this time as a psychological counterpart of such discovery. I call it the psychocentric revelation, a neo-Copernican paradigm shift. Next, please. The Copernican or heliocentric revolution established the sun as the center of the material universe. The psychocentric revelation will establish the soul as the center of conscious experience and the Deva kingdom as the new world to be collectively acknowledged as we expand our horizons. We expand our horizons from a flat world of rational self-interest to the multiple dimensions of space consciousness. On the slide, again, are the drawings from Gumi. The one in the center refers to the solar angel, or Ashnivata. Ken Wilber's multidimensional post-metaphysical model of pre-personal, personal, and transpersonal evolution may also help us map out this new world consciousness. For instance, when Wilber states that the health of the entire spiral of development is the chief ethical imperative, and that it can be derived directly from the basic moral intuition, which is to preserve and promote the greatest depth for the greatest span. Isn't he pointing in the same direction that DK does in promoting the greatest good of the greatest number? According to Ferguson, powerful archetypes are involved in this transition. One of them, the fire maker, the one who rekindles the flames of the intuition, addresses precisely the new yoga which a group of spiritual pioneers is destined to reveal. Next. The revelation of the will-to-good wing of the Aquarian group of world servers will be different. It involves the revelation of the monadic presence. The members of the will-to-good wing of the Aquarian group would need a definite and sustained effort to sense the monadic presence throughout the universe and in all forms, and in all presentations of truth. An effort primarily to see, in the light of which the angel radiates, the point of light behind all phenomenal appearances. This is a DK quote. If we substitute the word angel for Christ, we may find an inspiration for this conference too. Sensing the monadic presence, not theoretically, but in vibrating response to its existence, the disciple reaches the stage of ascertaining of the purpose. This is followed by carrying some world problem, some design which has evolved in the mind or the heart of the disciple for the helping of humanity in what is esoterically called the triple light of the intuition. Next. The keynote of the new yoga, we are told, will be synthesis. Its objective will be conscious development of the intuitive faculty. So, what is this intuitive faculty? It is the higher octave of the intellect as it synthesizes all five senses of perception into a new common sense. The intuitive sense has to be developed first among the will-to-good wing of the acquiring group of world servers for culture and civilization to evolve to the next level of consciousness. The way to develop such new synthetic sense is the technique of the presence, or as I prefer to call it, the practice of the infinite monadic presence. It is a constant meditative or meditative attitude, not a formula. Next. So, I will share with you some of my maps about this fiery yoga of synthesis and how such maps integrate Vicente Beltrán's work with other approaches to the Agni Yoga and to the weaving of that bridge of light between the concrete and the abstract mind, which we call the Antakarana. I say that they are my maps just because I want to assume responsibility for them. However, they are in fact the result of group meditations, both in Spanish and English-speaking groups, with whom I have shared these ideas for years, and out of which richer and more comprehensive maps have resulted. I thank and acknowledge them as the co-authors of these maps. Next. First, and as previously mentioned, the teachings of Helena Roerich refer to a first-ray approach to the Agni Yoga. Second, DK outlines a second-ray approach and names it the technique of the presence, but he makes it very clear that it's not a formula but an attitude, a way of life to develop the intuitive or seventh sense. Vicente Beltrán's ashramic teachings in regard to Agni Yoga, worded in terms of attentiveness, serene expectation, and adaptability, fit perfectly well with DK's preparatory stages of the technique of the presence. Third, the third-ray approach represented by the Kala Chakra. Next. I will relate DK's words of power used in the construction of the Antakarana to the three approaches to Agni Yoga. For the first ray, this word of power is, I assert the fact. According to DK, this factual assumption is not faith, but knowledge and conviction. And upon this realized conviction, the disciple rests, acts, and depends. It becomes an unalterable and unchangeable attitude. The meaning will become clearer if the disciple will ponder the distinctions between faith and conviction. It is this divine assertion which holds the universe in being. It is this divine assertion which is the embodied summation of all knowledge and love. And the first-ray disciple must begin to use this technique, resting back upon his divine prerogative of assertion. Ponder on this statement. It is the technique of Shambhala and the established right, prerogative, and privilege of all first-ray souls. End of quote. The phrase, I affirm, appears 123 times in the Helena Roerich Agni Yoga books. Next. Let me address the third-ray approach before I do the second. The word of power for the third ray is purpose itself am I. David Wrigley, a Sanskrit scholar and Kala Chakra teacher, states in a 1991 article in The Beacon, and I quote, the Kala Chakra system consists of three parts, termed outer, inner, and other, presented in a system of detailed correspondences. In brief, the Kala Chakra's mandala is a cosmogram representing the outer and inner worlds in idealized form. The Kala Chakra Yoga is a meditative practice utilizing the correspondences presented in the system to allow the meditator, the microcosm, to identify with the macrocosm and with their idealized form in the Kala Chakra mandala for the purpose of purifying the microcosm and the macrocosm. End of quote. David has also pointed out elsewhere that the recent spread of the secret Tibetan teachings to the West as a result of Tibet's current political situation may be related to the post-1975 revelatory phase of the teachings. Next. For the second-ray disciple, the word of power used in the construction of the Antakarana is, "I see the greatest light." DK states that, and I quote, "It has relation to the central spiritual sun and not to the heart of the sun. It involves the most intense effort to see in the light the relation of the whole, and this is one of the most potent experiences to which the disciple can be subjected. It is not vision or even aspiration to see the vision. It is complete sight, and of this the Masonic symbol of the eye of God, the all-seeing eye, is the expression." End of quote. The technique of the presence is one of three techniques introduced in the book Glamour, A World Problem by DK. These are the technique of indifference to vitalize Maya, the technique of light to dissipate astral glamour, and the technique of the presence to dispel mental illusion. Next. According to Vicente Beltrán, the three foundations for the practice of Agni Yoga are profound attentiveness, serene expectation, and perfect adaptability. In that triad, we also see the three rays of aspect represented. The first ray of power relates to intention, attention, purpose, identification. The second ray of love wisdom relates to a quiet but positively active attitude of serenity. Active like the concept of positive harmlessness, repeated so many times in DK's teachings. The third ray of creative intelligence is definitely related to the capacity to adapt to an environment, which reminds me of Buckminster Fuller's concept of tensegrity. That is, the ability to absorb stress by the right balance and distribution of tension. Next. Interestingly, according to DK, there are precisely three preliminary steps for which, and I quote, "the practice of alignment should have prepared the student of the higher mysteries. These steps must precede all effort to develop the intuition, and this may take several months or even years of careful preparation." End of quote. These preliminary steps are, first, the evocation of the stage of spiritual tension related to Vicente Beltrán's concept of attentiveness. Second, the personality becoming receptive and non-resistant to the life of the soul, achieving a state of fusion with the soul or angel as a soul-infused personality, and related to Vicente Beltrán's concept of adaptability. Third, the holding of the mind steady in the light of the soul, related to Vicente Beltrán's concept of a serene state of expectation. Next. Our maps go one step further. We think that there is a relationship between the teachings, the technique of the presence, and the rules on why magic. The technique of the presence relates to the rules on why magic on the mental plane. Those familiar with the technique of the presence may realize that its quote-unquote abrupt ending in a fiery ordeal may just be a reflection of a transition from the mental to the emotional and physical planes addressed in the rules on why magic. A more thorough description of this synthesis resulting from the application of the technique of the presence itself is available in our website, english.agniyoga.org, agni-yoga.org. Next, please. Therefore, the results of our research and personal experience indicate that the Spanish-speaking world has been given the opportunity to receive authentic hierarchical teachings delivered originally in Spanish, adapted to the Spanish Latin culture. The hierarchy has not forgotten, more than 500 million Spanish-speaking people. Spanish is the fourth most commonly spoken language in the world. Don Francisco Brualla, one of the disciples appearing in the book Discipleship in the New Age with the initials IAP, founded a branch of the Arcane School in Argentina in 1937. He was the first-ray disciple, first-ray soul, whose work was to be complemented by Vicente Beltrán's second-ray approach. They did not meet in person. They did not meet each other. But for sure, they did and do so in spirit now. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, the pieces of the puzzle begin to make a coherent whole. Next. Finally, I'm on time. Our celebration at the recent festival of the new group of world servers was dedicated to the inauguration of the next 7-year cycle of our work in Spain, Portugal, and Latin America. It was dedicated to our beloved and universal archetype of Don Quixote. As shown in these paintings, the one in the center, these paintings are authored by Lola Lopez from Valencia, Spain, and she titled the center one, Agni Yoga, specifically. The Aquarian transformation of Don Quixote as a practical idealist in our own hearts, transfiguring life in terms of accomplishment, may be one of our best contributions to the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ. The Quixote-Sancho duality is a symbol of our struggle to become soul-infused personalities, aspiring to serve as initiates of the monadic presence radiated by the Christ. Next. I am not as talented as Michael is with music, but if you can imagine in your minds the music of Impossible Dream from the Band of La Mancha, as I read this slide, please, you can help me out. These are DK quotes on Spain that many of you may already know. Spain, like all countries, has a spiritual destiny. That destiny is shared with all Spanish-speaking countries. Its unique blend of the 6th and 7th ray makes it a fertile ground for idealism and magic in the service of the good, the beautiful, and the true. As we can see here, and as Michael was addressing in the previous talk, the future holds promise for magical work. Spain will have a prominent role on that, according to DK, and particularly the scientific magic approach in the Church of the Future. Vicente Beltrán Anglada was born in Spain for a purpose. His original contributions to the modern esoteric literature are truly universal in their scope and, at the same time, perfectly adapted to the Hispanic culture. Next. With the Great Invocation as our shield, Don Quixote, our practical dream, Agni Yoga, our mother, Don Vicente, our brother, one heart, two wings, will to good, and goodwill. Thus we share life in the radiant heart of the coming one. Thank you very much.
That was just absolutely heart-opening. Thank you so much, Jose. This is so perfect to have this plenary at this time of day to begin our conference, because I feel like you've really opened the wings of the heart for this conference. Thank you from our heart. We now have a half hour to take a break, visit the bookstore. Wonderful books, wonderful books, wonderful.